The war between humans and the Xenar Empire had ended after years of blood and fire among the stars. Worlds had burned, ships had fallen in silence, and both sides had lost more lives than they could ever count. At last, the leaders of both nations agreed to a treaty. To seal this fragile peace, the Xenar rulers decided to send two of their princesses to live under human care. It was not a gift of defeat but a symbol of trust, though many whispered it was nothing more than an exchange of chains. The names of the two princesses were Myra and Laura. They were sisters but different in every way. Myra was bold, sharp with her words, and her eyes carried fire. She stood tall, even when surrounded by human soldiers, her pride refusing to bend. Laura was quiet, her steps gentle, her voice soft, and her gaze watchful. She carried a calm strength that did not need to be spoken. Both were uncertain of the fate that awaited them among the humans. The one chosen to receive them was a warrior named Ron. He was no noble lord or decorated officer, yet the human council insisted that he was the right man. Ron had fought across countless battles and was known not only for his skill but also for his fairness. Soldiers under his command respected him because he treated them as equals. Enemies who met him in battle remembered his courage. Now he stood on the landing bay of the human starship Ironwind, waiting for the two alien princesses to arrive. The bay was filled with soldiers standing in rows, their armor polished, their banners high. The air was tense, for many of them did not agree with the treaty. They had fought the Xenar for years and lost friends to their fire. To welcome alien royalty felt like swallowing ash. Yet orders were orders, and discipline kept them in line. The shuttle descended from the sky, its engines echoing across the metal floor. When the ramp lowered, Myra and Laura walked down slowly, guarded by a few Xenar escorts. Their robes shimmered with faint colors of their home world, their faces calm yet hiding unease. Every soldier's eyes followed them, silent and judging. Myra held her chin high, unwilling to show weakness, while Laura kept close to her sister, her hands folded. Ron stepped forward. His armor was not shining like the ceremonial soldiers, but it was scarred and worn, marked by the past. His presence was steady, like a mountain that would not move. He bowed his head slightly, not as a master to servants but as one warrior showing respect to others. His voice was deep and calm when he spoke. "Princess Myra, Princess Laura. I am Ron. By the agreement of our leaders, you will remain under my care. You will have safety here." Myra narrowed her eyes, searching his face for hidden cruelty. She had expected mocking laughter or prideful boasting from a human warrior. Instead, she found nothing but calm honesty. Still, her pride refused to let her lower her guard. "You call it safety," she replied, her tone sharp. "But we know what we are here. We are symbols. We are trophies of war." The soldiers behind Ron shifted uncomfortably, but he did not flinch. He looked directly at her, his voice steady. "No. You are not trophies. You are not spoils. You are living proof that peace can be real. I will treat you with the honor that is owed to you." His words surprised not only the princesses but also the humans standing nearby. Some frowned, unhappy with his tone, while others looked away, unsure. Laura studied him carefully. His eyes were not those of a man seeking glory. They were the eyes of one who had seen too much death and carried it silently. The Xenar escorts bowed to the princesses and left them, retreating back into the shuttle. The engines roared, and the craft lifted, leaving Myra and Laura standing alone in the human bay. The sound faded, and silence pressed down once more. Every soldier watched. "Come," Ron said gently. I will show you where you will stay. He led them through the ship's corridors. The Iron Wind was vast, built for war, its walls lined with steel and humming with engines. Myra's sharp gaze moved across every corner, memorizing the ship like a hawk searching for weakness. Laura walked quietly, her hands brushing the smooth metal as if listening to the heart of the vessel. The crew they passed whispered among themselves. Some looked with curiosity, others with dislike. The Xenar were known for their pride and cruelty, and many humans could not forget the battles. Yet the presence of their warrior captain kept the whispers from turning into insults. Ron stopped at a chamber prepared for them. It was simple but clean, with beds, food, and space to rest. There were no chains, no locked doors. The sisters exchanged a glance. Myra almost laughed bitterly. So this is our prison. It is painted kindly, but a prison is still a prison. Ron turned to her, his voice calm. A prison has bars. Here you have none. You may walk the ship freely, but I ask for caution. Not all will see you as I do. Laura spoke for the first time since leaving the shuttle. Her voice was soft but clear. Why do you speak this way? We were told humans were proud of victory, that they would humiliate us. Yet you speak of honor. Why? Ron looked at her for a long moment. Because I have seen victory without honor, and it leaves nothing but emptiness. Peace cannot grow from chains. It grows only when respect is given. His words lingered in the air. Myra folded her arms, refusing to answer, but deep inside her heart there was a flicker of doubt in her anger. Laura lowered her eyes thoughtfully, unsure what to believe. When Ron left them to rest, the sisters sat together in silence. The hum of the engines filled the room. Myra clenched her fists. We must not trust him. This is their game. They want us to grow soft. Laura looked at her sister, then at the door where Ron had gone. Perhaps. But perhaps he speaks truth. His eyes did not lie. Myra shook her head, unwilling to let hope weaken her guard. Yet even she could not push away the strange feeling that the human warrior was unlike the enemy she had been told about all her life. Life aboard the human starship Ironwind was not easy for Myra and Laura. Every corridor they walked through was filled with eyes that followed them. Some looked with curiosity, others with suspicion, and some with hidden anger. To the humans, the princesses were the faces of an enemy that had once burned their colonies and slain their families. Forgiveness did not come quickly, even when leaders signed treaties. Myra felt the weight of those stares with every step. She carried herself proudly, refusing to bow her head. She spoke little to the crew, answering questions with sharp words. Her defiance was her shield, for she would not allow them to see fear in her. Laura was quieter, watching with careful eyes. She did not return anger with anger. Instead, she tried to understand the strange rhythm of this ship and the people who lived within it. Ron, the warrior who had been tasked to guard them, noticed the tension that spread like smoke. He understood his crew well. They respected him, but that respect did not erase years of pain. Many of them wanted the Xenar gone. Some even whispered that the princesses should be treated as prisoners, not as guests. Ron listened to these voices but gave no sign of agreement. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. One evening, Myra and Laura joined Ron in the mess hall. It was a large space with long tables where soldiers ate together. The moment the princesses entered, the noise of chatter softened, and eyes turned to them. Myra felt the sharpness of those gazes and sat down with stiff shoulders. Laura sat beside her, folding her hands neatly. The soldiers continued to eat, but whispers passed between them. Some laughed under their breath. One soldier, younger than the rest, finally stood up. He walked toward their table, his jaw tight, his voice sharp. "Why should they sit here among us? These are the daughters of those who ordered the death of our families. They do not belong here." The hall grew silent. Myra's eyes blazed, and she was ready to rise and throw back his words with her own. But before she could, Ron stood. His presence alone was enough to quiet the hall. He looked at the young soldier with calm steel in his eyes. "They are here because the war is over. They are here because our leaders chose peace. You will honor that choice, as I do." The soldier clenched his fists. "Peace does not bring back the dead." "No," Ron said, his voice firm but steady. "It does not. But anger will not bring them back either. If we treat the innocent with the cruelty of war, then we are no better than those who wronged us." The hall was silent again. The young soldier lowered his eyes, ashamed, and returned to his seat. Myra watched with surprise. She had expected Ron to defend his crew, not her and Laura. She studied his face, searching for falsehood, but once again found only honesty. After the meal, Myra confronted him in the corridor. "Why do you do this?" she demanded. "Why defend us when your people despise us?" Ron looked at her without anger. "Because my honor is not built on hatred. I have fought long enough to know it is easy to destroy. It is harder to build. I will not add more destruction when there is a chance for something better." Myra's lips tightened, but she had no answer. Her pride refused to thank him, yet her heart was unsettled. Laura, walking quietly beside them, whispered, "You speak like someone who has carried much sorrow." Ron gave a small nod but said nothing more. Days passed, and the tension remained. Myra walked the ship with her head high, ignoring whispers, while Laura spent time learning. She visited the ship's library, studying human history and culture. She asked questions about the stars humans had settled and the battles they had fought. The crew, though wary, began to see that she was not arrogant. Some even answered her questions with patience. One night, the alarms of the ship rang suddenly. Red lights flashed through the corridors, and the voice of the commander filled the air. "Unidentified vessels approaching. All units to stations." The iron wind shuddered as it changed course, engines roaring. Myra and Laura stood in their chamber, fear flashing in their eyes. Ron entered, his armor strapped, his weapon at his side. His face was calm, though the ship trembled around them. "Stay here," he told them. "You will be safe." But Myra stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "What is happening?" "Raiders," Ron answered. "Pirates who prey on ships like this. They will try to take anything of value, and you two are more than valuable to them." Laura gasped softly, and Myra's fists clenched. Before she could speak, the ship shook again, and the sound of impact echoed through the walls. "They are boarding," Ron said. His eyes narrowed. "If they reach you, they will not show mercy. Do as I say." He turned to leave, but Myra's voice stopped him. "You think we are helpless. But we are daughters of warriors. Give me a blade, and I will stand beside you." Ron paused. His hand tightened on his weapon. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, he drew a smaller blade from his side and handed it to her. "Do not waste it. Protect your sister." Myra took the blade, her heart pounding. For the first time, a human warrior had given her trust. Laura looked at both of them with wide eyes. The sounds of battle grew closer. Shouts rang through the corridors. Ron moved to the door, his armor shining in the red glow. "Stay close if you follow me. But remember, I will not risk this ship for pride." The alarms of the Iron Wind rang louder with every passing moment. The ship shook under the assault of the pirate vessels. Red lights flashed through the corridors, guiding soldiers to their stations. Boots thundered against the steel floors as humans prepared for battle. Myra held the blade Ron had given her, its weight solid in her hands. Laura stood beside her, eyes wide but steady, her quiet courage holding her firm. Ron led them through the narrow corridors, his movements calm and controlled. He had lived through too many battles to be shaken by fear. He knew panic was more dangerous than the enemy itself. The roar of weapons echoed from the forward sections of the ship. The pirates had broken through. When they turned a corner, the first clash met them. Human soldiers fought against armored raiders, their weapons flashing with sparks. Shouts filled the air, along with the crackle of gunfire. Ron stepped forward, striking with precision. His blade cut through the nearest raider's weapon arm, and with a swift motion, the enemy fell. Myra felt her heart pound as she lifted the blade Ron had given her. A raider rushed toward her, sneering beneath his helmet. Without thinking, she struck, the sound of steel ringing through the corridor. Her arm trembled, but her strike was true, and the raider fell back. Laura gasped, but Myra stood firm, fire burning in her eyes. "Stay close," Ron ordered, his voice strong. The three moved as one through the chaos. Myra fought with fierce spirit, untrained but unwilling to falter. Ron guided her, his strikes swift and deadly. Laura, though unarmed, shouted warnings, pointing out dangers, helping them avoid ambush. She guided soldiers to safer paths, her clear voice rising above the noise. She was not a fighter with weapons, but she became a guide through the storm. The pirates pressed hard. They sought treasure, supplies, and above all, the alien princesses. Word had spread through the raider fleets that the sisters of the Zener throne were aboard the Iron Wind. Capturing them would mean riches, power, and glory among the lawless. That hunger drove them forward like wolves. But Ron was a mountain against the storm. His blade flashed, his armor took strikes, yet he did not fall. He shielded Myra and Laura with his very body, his every move made to protect as much as to strike. The soldiers of the Iron Wind saw this and rallied around him. They fought harder, refusing to allow the pirates to break their line. At one point, a pirate broke through and charged directly at Laura. She froze, fear flashing in her eyes. Myra leapt forward, her blade raised. Their weapons clashed, the force nearly knocking Myra back. The pirate sneered, stronger and more skilled. Just as he was about to strike her down, Ron's blade pierced his side, ending the fight. Myra stumbled back, her chest heaving. Ron looked at her, his face stern but not unkind. "You are brave," he said, "but bravery without control is dangerous. Remember that." Myra clenched her jaw, angry at her weakness, yet a spark of pride remained that she had stood her ground at all. The battle raged for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Slowly, the pirates began to break. The discipline of the human soldiers, guided by Ron's steady command, turned the tide. Bodies of fallen raiders littered the corridors, their ambition crushed. Those who survived fled back to their ships, engines roaring as they retreated into the void. The alarms faded, and silence returned to the Iron Wind, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the hiss of damaged vents. Soldiers began to carry the injured to the medics. The air smelled of smoke and burned steel. Myra lowered her blade, her arms shaking from exhaustion. She looked at Ron, who still stood tall, though his armor was dented and scarred. He breathed heavily but showed no sign of weakness. Laura walked to her sister, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "You fought with courage," Laura whispered. "Father would have been proud." Myra's eyes softened for a moment, but she quickly looked away, unwilling to show her feelings. She turned her gaze to Ron. "You trusted me with the blade. Even when I could have failed." "Why?" Ron cleaned his weapon before answering. His voice was calm, steady as ever. "Because trust is the first step toward peace. If I could not trust you in battle, then how could I ask for peace when the fighting ends?" Myra frowned, unsure how to respond. She had been raised to see humans as enemies, as deceivers who would take any chance to break their word. Yet this warrior had risked his life beside her and even placed his trust in her. It was something she had never expected. Laura looked at Ron with quiet respect. "You fought for us as if we were your own people. Not as enemies, not as burdens. That is something I will not forget." The crew of the Iron Wind also noticed. Soldiers who had doubted the princesses now whispered differently. They had seen Myra stand with them, blade in hand. They had heard Laura's clear voice guiding them through the chaos. The sisters had not hidden behind others. They had stood as part of the crew. Later, when the ship was calm again, Ron gathered them in the strategy room. A star map glowed across the table, showing the path of the Iron Wind. He spoke plainly. "You now see what dangers exist in this space. Pirates and raiders will hunt you, not because of what you are, but because of what you represent. You cannot face them alone. You cannot survive by pride or silence. If you wish to endure, you must learn to stand with those around you. That is the way of my people." Myra's pride burned at his words, but deep inside, she knew he spoke truth. Laura nodded slowly, understanding more with each passing moment. That night, in their chamber, Myra paced while Laura sat quietly. "He is different," Myra admitted at last. "Different from what we were told. He does not treat us as trophies, and he does not fight only for himself. I do not trust him fully, but I cannot deny what I saw." Laura's soft voice answered. "Perhaps humans are not as we were taught. Perhaps peace is not a trick. Perhaps it is real, if men like him exist." Myra said nothing more, but as she lay down to rest, the blade Ron had given her rested beside her bed. For the first time since leaving their world, she felt a small spark of something new. It was not trust yet, not friendship, but the beginning of respect. The test had come in fire and blood, and all three had survived it together. The future remained uncertain, but in that shared battle, a bond had been forged that none of them could deny. The Iron Wind sailed on through the dark sea of stars, its engines steady once more. The pirate raid had passed, but the shadow of danger still lingered in every corridor. Repairs continued day and night. Soldiers worked with tired hands, sealing broken walls, carrying away wreckage, and tending to the wounded. Yet among the crew, something had changed. Whispers spread about the alien princesses. No longer were they only symbols of war or burdens of peace. They had stood with the humans in battle, and that had planted a seed of respect. Myra felt it when she walked through the ship. The eyes that once glared with hatred now carried a measure of caution and even curiosity. Some soldiers nodded to her, not as an enemy but as someone who had fought beside them. She held her head high, though inside she was restless. She had not expected this shift. She had not expected to earn even a fraction of their respect. Laura noticed more than Myra. The crew no longer whispered insults in her presence. Some even greeted her gently. She spent time in the library chamber, learning about human colonies, their wars of the past, and the way they rebuilt after every fall. She saw a pattern in their history. No matter how many times humans were struck down, they rose again with stubborn strength. It was not pride that held them up but resilience. That strength both unsettled and impressed her. Ron remained steady, as always. He trained his soldiers, walked the ship, and kept order. He spoke little, but his presence was enough to calm unrest. When Myra looked at him, she saw a man who carried the weight of war on his shoulders but did not allow it to bend him. That steadiness was something she could not understand, yet it drew her thoughts again and again. One evening, as the ship traveled through a quiet sector of space, Laura asked Ron to meet in the council room. Myra followed, suspicious of her sister's intent. The room was dim, lit only by the blue glow of the star map. Ron stood with his arms crossed, waiting for their words. Laura's voice was soft but clear. There is something you should know. Something we have hidden since the day we arrived. Myra turned sharply. Laura, no. We cannot. Her sister lifted a hand gently, stopping her. He deserves to know. Ron's eyes narrowed. What is it? Laura took a breath, her gaze steady. The treaty was not what it seemed. Our father agreed to send us as a sign of peace, but not all in the Xener court supported it. Some wished to see it fail. They planned to send assassins with us, disguised as servants, to strike at you and your leaders. Ron's hand tightened on the table edge, though his face remained calm. Assassins. Yet none came. Laura nodded. Because we stopped them. We refused to let them follow. We left our world with only ourselves. It was the only way to protect the chance for peace. If we had allowed them to come, your people would have seen betrayal. The war would have begun again. Myra's fists clenched. And now you have spoken the secret we swore to keep. Do you understand what this means, Laura? If word spreads, the humans will think we are part of the plan. Ron studied them both. His voice was quiet but carried weight. Why tell me this now? Laura lowered her eyes. Because I have seen enough of your people to know you value truth. If we hide this, it will rise later and bring more danger. If we are to live among you, we must not hide behind silence. Myra looked at Ron fiercely, as if daring him to condemn them. So now you know. You see what your peace was built on. Lies and betrayal. What will you do? Will you call us traitors? Will you throw us into the cells your soldiers wish for us? The room was silent. Ron looked at Myra first, then at Laura. His expression did not change. At last, he spoke. I will do nothing against you. You chose to prevent bloodshed. You chose peace when you could have chosen war. That speaks more of your honor than your father's court. Myra blinked, stunned. She had expected fury, accusations, chains. Instead, his calm voice carried only respect. You would still trust us? She asked. I trust what I see with my own eyes, Ron replied. You stood with my soldiers against pirates. You warned me now instead of hiding the truth. That is enough. Laura's eyes softened, and she bowed her head in gratitude. Myra crossed her arms, unsettled. She could not understand this man. Human warriors were meant to be cruel, to take vengeance at every chance. Yet Ron carried himself with honor that matched her own people's legends. The days that followed were quieter. Myra spoke less, lost in thought. Laura grew more open with the crew, sharing stories of Xener culture, tales of their homeworld's skies and seas. The humans listened with interest, learning about the world they had once fought against. In return, they told her of Earth, a world of blue oceans and wide forests. Laura began to see not just differences but similarities between them. Myra, though still guarded, watched these exchanges carefully. The more she saw, the more cracks formed in her walls of pride. She began to wonder if her people had been wrong all along about humanity. One night, she sat in her chamber staring at the blade Ron had given her during the battle. The steel reflected her face, her eyes filled with conflict. Laura entered quietly and sat beside her. "You trust him, don't you?" Myra asked suddenly. Laura nodded. "I do. And I think you are beginning to as well." Myra shook her head sharply. "I cannot. To trust him would be to betray our people." Laura's soft voice answered, "Or perhaps it is to save them. If humans and Xener can stand together, fewer will die. Is that not worth the risk?" Myra fell silent. Her pride clashed with her reason, but deep inside, a small flame of hope began to flicker. On the command deck, far from their private talk, Ron stood alone, staring at the endless stars. He knew the truth now, the hidden poison behind the treaty. Yet instead of anger, he felt a strange respect for the sisters. They had carried a heavy secret to protect peace, and now they had shared it with him. He knew trust could not be built in a single day, but he also knew that something important had begun. The Iron Wind traveled through the quiet lanes of space, its course set for a distant colony world called Haven Reach. It was not a fortress world or a center of trade, but a settlement where farmers tilled the soil, miners dug into the mountains, and families built their homes under the wide sky. Ron had requested to dock there before returning to the core territories. He wanted the princesses to see more than soldiers and steel walls. He wanted them to see how humans lived in peace. When the ship descended through Haven Reach's clouds, Myra and Laura stood by the viewing window. The surface stretched wide and green, dotted with rivers and forests. Villages lay across the valleys, their lights glowing gently. It was a world so different from the stone palaces and sharp towers of their home world. Laura pressed her hand against the glass. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Myra said nothing, but her eyes lingered on the fields. She had been told humans were creatures of conquest, always chasing war, yet what she saw was not an army but families living in harmony with their land. The ship landed near a settlement. When the ramp lowered, the scent of soil and fresh air rushed inside. It was the first time Myra and Laura had breathed air not filtered through machines since leaving their home. They walked down with Ron at their side. Farmers and townsfolk gathered, their faces curious but not hostile. Children peeked from behind their parents, pointing at the tall figures of the Xener princesses. One elder stepped forward to greet them. He was a man with silver hair, his hands rough from years of work. "Welcome to Haven Reach," he said kindly. "You will find no soldiers here, only workers and families." Ron inclined his head in respect. "We thank you for receiving us. The princesses will stay a short time, to see how we live beyond the battlefield." The people offered smiles, some cautious, others warm. Myra held her chin high, wary of every glance, while Laura returned nods with a gentle smile. The group moved through the settlement, past fields where men and women worked together to guide machines that plowed the soil. Children carried baskets of fruit, their laughter rising into the air. Laura's eyes shone with wonder. Your people do not live only for war, she said softly to Ron. Ron's expression was calm. War is not life. War is only the shadow that sometimes falls across it. This is what we fight for. Not for glory, not for conquest. For this. Myra looked around with doubt. You speak of peace as if it is simple. Yet peace is fragile. My people would see this as weakness. Ron met her gaze. Then perhaps your people have forgotten the strength it takes to keep peace. Any fool can start a war. It takes courage to build what cannot be broken easily. The words lingered in Myra's mind, even as she turned away. Later, the sisters were invited into one of the homes. A family shared food with them, offering bread, fruits, and roasted meat. The children stared with wide eyes, asking questions about the princess's world. Laura answered kindly, telling them about the seas of Xenar, where the waters glowed beneath twin moons. Myra at first stayed silent, but when one boy asked about the animals of her world, she found herself describing the great winged beasts that soared over Xenar's mountains. The children listened with awe, and for a moment Myra forgot her pride. When the meal was done, the elder of the village asked Ron to speak to the people. They gathered in the square under the setting sun. Ron stood with the princesses at his side. These two, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, came to us as symbols of peace. Many doubted them, and many still do. Yet I have fought beside them. I have seen their courage. And now they see you, the heart of what we protect. Not palaces or riches. Families. Fields. Life. The crowd murmured in approval. Myra looked around, unsettled by the warmth these humans showed each other. It was not the cold discipline of soldiers or the harsh order of her people's empire. It was unity born of choice, not fear. That night, the sisters walked alone near the edge of the fields. The stars shone brightly above. Laura's voice was quiet but full of thought. I think I understand now. Humans do not fight only for power. They fight because they have something worth keeping. That is why they endure. Myra frowned. Do not be so quick to believe. We cannot forget what humans have done. They are not saints. No, Laura agreed, but neither are we. Perhaps it is not about saints or sinners. Perhaps it is about what path we choose next. Myra fell silent. Her heart wrestled with pride and doubt. She had seen Ron's honor in battle, and now she had seen the peace his people lived for. The walls she had built within herself began to crack. The next day, as they prepared to leave Haven Reach, a small group of farmers approached the princesses with gifts. They offered Myra a woven cloak dyed with the colors of the valley, and to Laura, they gave a book written by the settlers, filled with their stories. The gifts were humble but given with sincerity. Myra took the cloak with stiff hands. She wanted to refuse, to say she needed nothing from humans, but when she saw the hopeful eyes of the farmers, she could not speak the words. Instead, she gave a short nod. Laura thanked them with warmth, her smile brightening the faces around her. Back aboard the Iron Wind, Myra stood at the window again as the colony faded behind them. Ron came to stand beside her. You saw them, he said. Do you still believe we fight for nothing but conquest? Myra hesitated. Her voice was softer than before. I saw people who live simply. People who protect each other. That is not what I expected. But I do not know if it is enough to change the course of empires. Ron looked out at the stars. Change begins with small things. A single seed grows into a forest. A single act of trust can change the fate of nations. Myra turned away, her thoughts heavy. She would not admit it aloud, but she felt the truth in his words. Laura, watching quietly from the other side of the chamber, saw the conflict in her sister's eyes. She knew Myra's heart was shifting, even if Myra herself refused to see it. The iron wind moved on, carrying them toward new trials. The sisters had witnessed the human way of peace, and though doubts still burned, something deeper had taken root. Respect, fragile but growing, now lived within them. The iron wind traveled across silent space, its engines carrying the crew toward the next human stronghold. Inside the ship, the crew trained, repaired equipment, and kept watch on the star charts. For Myra and Laura, the days after leaving Haven Reach were filled with restless thoughts. They had seen the peaceful side of humans, but peace was not the only face of the galaxy. Myra walked the halls at night, her cloak from the farmers around her shoulders. She had not admitted to anyone how much it meant to her. Laura often read the book given by the settlers, quietly turning the pages while her mind wandered. Both sisters were learning, but they also carried the weight of their people's defeat. One evening, Ron gathered the officers. Myra and Laura were invited to join. On the table lay a map of the stars. Red marks glowed across several sectors. These are raids, Ron explained. Not Xener ships. Another empire moves in the shadows. They strike colonies when our patrols are far. They take resources and vanish. We suspect they are testing our defenses. The officers spoke of strategies and warnings. Laura listened carefully. Myra folded her arms, her sharp eyes studying the map. If you are distracted by these raids, the Xener may see weakness and strike again, she said. Ron nodded. That is why we cannot allow both threats to grow. We must uncover who leads these shadow fleets. The discussion ended with a plan to investigate the nearest system hit by raids. The Iron Wind set course at once. As the ship traveled, Myra noticed unease among the crew. Whispers carried through the halls. She finally asked one soldier about it. The man looked nervous but answered. Some believe there is a traitor. The raiders know where we are weak. Someone may be giving them information. Myra repeated the words to Ron. He did not dismiss them. Instead, he admitted the fear had reached him as well. But I cannot accuse without proof, he said. When the Iron Wind reached the targeted system, wreckage floated in space. Burned ships drifted, their signals silent. The colony below was scarred, smoke rising from its surface. Survivors sent weak transmissions asking for help. The crew moved quickly to land aid parties. Myra and Laura went with Ron to the surface. The sight shook them. Families huddled in ruins. Machines lay broken. Children cried for missing parents. Soldiers carried wounded on stretchers. Laura knelt beside a woman who clutched her injured son. She tore cloth to bind the boy's wound, her hands steady. Myra stood nearby, her face grim. She had seen the ruins of war on her own world, but to see it here, after witnessing Haven Reach's peace, made her heart heavy. The survivors spoke of the raiders. Ships with black hulls, symbols unknown, weapons brutal and swift. They struck with no warning and left only destruction. Ron looked over the broken colony. They do not fight for territory. They fight to spread fear. They want us to chase shadows while they grow stronger. The next days were spent repairing what could be saved. Myra helped organize defense positions, using her knowledge of strategy. Some soldiers still looked at her with distrust, but they could not deny her skill. Laura spent time with the children, calming them with stories of the twin moons of Zener. One night, while Ron studied reports in the command room, Myra entered with sharp news. "I have found something," she said. She placed a small device on the table. "Hidden in one of the storage rooms. A transmitter. Someone on this ship has been sending signals." Ron's jaw tightened. So it is true. A traitor among us. They began a search in secret, moving carefully so as not to alarm the crew. Days passed. Suspicion grew heavy in the air. Then, during a patrol in orbit, the Iron Wind was ambushed. Raider ships fell upon them with precision, striking at weak points. Alarms blared through the halls. The crew scrambled to stations. Ron commanded with steady voice, directing fire against the raiders. Myra and Laura stood beside him, refusing to retreat. The battle was fierce. The Iron Wind shook under heavy fire. Yet the crew fought back with discipline. Myra's eyes caught movement on the deck. A soldier she had seen before was trying to slip away, his hand on a control panel. She rushed forward, blocking his path. The man drew a weapon, but Myra moved faster. Training from her years as a princess warrior came to her aid. She struck his arm, disarming him, and forced him to the ground. Soldiers rushed to hold him. The man shouted in rage, "You fools! You cannot win. The Shadow Fleet will burn you all." Ron looked down at him with cold eyes. "You betrayed your own people. For what?" The man spat words of hatred. "For power. When the raiders rise, they will rule, and I will stand with them." He was dragged away. With his control cut, the raiders lost their precise edge. The Iron Wind turned the tide. Guns roared, enemy ships burst into flames, and the survivors fled into the dark. When silence returned, the crew stood weary but alive. Ron looked at Myra. "You exposed him. You may have saved this ship." Myra said nothing for a moment. She only looked at the stars where the raiders had vanished. "He was human, yet he betrayed you. Do you still speak of honor when your own can fall so easily?" Ron's voice was firm. "One man's betrayal does not erase the honor of many. There will always be shadows. But we choose which path we walk. That is what gives us strength." Myra lowered her gaze, her thoughts tangled. She wanted to argue, yet part of her knew he was right. Laura placed a hand on her sister's arm. "He is right, Myra. We saw the colony. We saw their pain. Betrayal is real, but so is loyalty. Do not let the darkness blind you to the light." The Iron Wind resumed its journey. The crew carried scars, but they also carried resolve. They had survived treachery. They had seen the face of the Shadow Fleet. And they knew the war ahead would be harder than before. In her chamber that night, Myra stood by the window once more. She touched the cloak given to her at Haven Reach. For the first time, she whispered words she would not have spoken earlier. "Perhaps humans are not as simple as I believed. They can fall. But they can rise too." The Iron Wind sailed toward the edge of human-controlled space, carrying with it the lessons of battle, betrayal, and fragile trust. Myra and Laura had changed since their arrival. The princesses who had once been wary and proud now carried cautious respect in their hearts. They had seen the strength of humans, not only in war but in peace, and they had seen loyalty and courage in ways they had never expected. Ron stood on the command deck, surveying the stars ahead. His hand rested lightly on the console, though his mind carried the weight of responsibility. The shadow fleet that had threatened the colonies was still out there, hiding, planning, and testing defenses. Yet the ship was stronger now, not only in steel and weapons but in the hearts of those aboard it. Myra approached him quietly. She carried her blade at her side, the steel gleaming under the soft lights. Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed a new depth. "We have seen much," she said. "We have seen peace and betrayal, courage and fear. And we have survived." Ron looked at her, noting the change. "Yes. You have. And you have shown that trust can grow even in the most unlikely hearts." Myra's lips tightened. She did not speak of trust openly, but her posture, her calm in the presence of Ron, told the story. Laura followed behind, holding the book of stories from Haven Reach. She smiled softly. "We have learned that courage is not always about fighting. Sometimes it is about choosing to stand beside those who are different from you." Ron nodded. "That is true. And it is the foundation of all peace. Strength alone cannot protect life. Honor and trust must stand beside it." The sisters looked out at the stars. Myra's mind wandered to her home world, to the towers and halls she had left behind. She had thought humans were simple, driven only by conquest. Yet she had seen families, children, and warriors who lived not for power but for protection. She felt a strange mixture of pride and humility. Her people had sent her as a symbol, expecting submission. Instead, she had found understanding. The next days were filled with drills and training, though less harsh than before. Myra continued to practice with her blade, moving with more precision and thought. Laura worked alongside the medics, learning to care for wounds and tending to the needs of the crew. Their actions earned quiet respect from the soldiers who had once doubted them. Myra even saw a few smiles, small acknowledgments of shared hardship. Then came a message from Human Command. A new threat had been discovered on a distant planet. A fleet of raiders had gathered, larger and more organized than any before. Ron called a meeting of the officers, with the sisters in attendance. "We must strike before they reach civilian colonies," Ron said. "This fleet is dangerous not only for their firepower but because they rely on fear. If we act with strength and unity, we can prevent disaster." Myra's eyes narrowed. "And if they come prepared for us? If they use spies like before?" "Then we must be smarter," Ron answered. "We will rely on courage and on the loyalty of those who stand with us." The sisters exchanged a glance. They understood that the final test was coming. It was no longer about trust alone. It was about action, strategy, and the courage to face enemies together. When the Iron Wind approached the raider fleet, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The ships of the enemy were black and angular, their weapons glinting in the void. They had not expected a single human vessel to advance without support, yet here was the Iron Wind, a symbol of resilience. Ron took command with his usual calm. "Positions," he ordered. Soldiers and crew moved efficiently, their training clear. Myra stood at his side, blade ready. Laura watched the sensors, calling out warnings of approaching enemy ships. The battle began with sudden intensity. Lasers streaked through space, engines roared, and explosions lit the void. Myra moved swiftly on the deck, coordinating with soldiers who once doubted her. She struck where needed, her blade a reminder that even a single warrior could make a difference in the chaos. Laura guided injured crew to safety, her clear voice calm and reassuring. Ron led the charge, his strategy precise. He flanked the raiders, striking at key ships while protecting the Iron Wind. The sisters fought not only for survival but for something greater. They fought for life, for trust, and for the fragile bond that had formed between humans and Xenar. Hours passed. The enemy faltered under the unity and skill of the Iron Wind's crew. One by one, raider ships fell or fled. Myra, Laura, and Ron stood together, breathing heavily as silence returned. The threat was ended, for now, and the crew began to tend to the wounded and repair damage. After the battle, the sisters stood on the command deck. Myra's cloak from Haven Reach fluttered lightly in the recycled air. She looked at Ron, her expression serious but not hardened. "I have learned much," she said. "About humans, about trust, and about courage. You have shown me that strength is more than weapons." Ron inclined his head. "And you have shown me that honor can come from unexpected places. You have fought with courage and wisdom. You have become more than symbols. You are partners in this fight." Laura smiled gently. "We came thinking we would be captives, symbols of conquest. Instead, we found allies, and we have learned what it means to stand together." The crew gathered around, sharing quiet laughter and relief. They had faced darkness, betrayal, and fear, yet they had endured. The princesses and the warrior human had built bonds that could not easily be broken. Respect had grown into trust, and trust had grown into something stronger, understanding. As the Iron Wind sailed on toward the next destination, Myra and Laura looked out at the stars. Their hearts were heavier than when they had arrived, but not with sorrow. It was the weight of lessons learned, of courage gained, and of the knowledge that peace required effort from every hand. Ron stood silently beside them. "The universe is full of trials," he said. "But it is also full of those willing to fight for life, for family, and for honor. That is what makes us strong." Myra turned to him, her voice calm but full of meaning. "Then we will fight, not as symbols, but as allies. Together, human and Xenar, we will protect life where we can." Laura nodded, her soft voice joining the declaration. Together. The Iron Wind moved through the stars, carrying its crew forward. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, yet for the first time, Myra and Laura felt not fear, but purpose. They were no longer merely princesses of a fallen empire. They were warriors, protectors, and bridges between two worlds. In that moment, the bonds forged in fire, trust, and courage became unbreakable. And the universe, wide and unknown, awaited their next journey, with humans and Xenar standing side by side. The stars gleamed like silent witnesses, and for the first time, the sisters smiled freely, knowing they had found a place among allies, and a future worth defending.